We're always obsessing over climate change, AI revolutions, power grids, but beneath literally all of those global shifts is the simple, kind of unforgiving math of human population, right? Like how many of us actually are there and how fast are we multiplying? Welcome to this explainer, where today we're diving straight into the demographic transition. And listen, this isn't just some dry statistic from a history book, it is a massive, active process happening right this very second across the developing world.
And it all really boils down to one staggering question. Is the global population going to stabilize around 9 billion, or are we climbing all the way toward 12 billion by 2050? I mean, think about that. That 3 billion person gap, that is literally the size of the entire human population back in 1960. So where we ultimately land entirely hinges on the pace and completeness of this massive demographic shift that's currently unfolding.
Okay, Section 1. Measuring fertility and predicting population.
To really figure out where we're heading, demographers use a gold standard metric called the total fertility rate, or TFR for short. In plain English, this is just the average number of children a woman will have over her lifetime. And there's a magic number you need to remember here, 2.1. That is the exact replacement level rate needed to keep a population perfectly stable. If your rate is above 2.1, your population is growing. Drop below it, and, assuming no outside migration, your population naturally starts to shrink.
Now, you might hear the news talk about the crude birth rate, but honestly, TFR is a much better metric because it cuts straight through the noise. See, if a country just happens to have a huge generation of young adults right now, their overall birth rates are going to look super high. Even if individual families are actually pretty small, TFR strips away that generational distortion, making it incredibly precise for comparing different nations side by side.
To really ground this, let's look at the number 6.5. That is the current, staggering TFR in countries like Niger and Mali today. So we're talking about one woman averaging over 6 children in her lifetime. That is exactly what drives explosive, exponential population growth.
But then, on the absolute flip side, look at 0.78. That's the reality in South Korea right now. And that's not just low, that is literally the lowest rate ever recorded for a large country in human history. The global average is hovering around 2.3, but man, that average hides some absolutely wild, fascinating regional extremes.
Moving on to Section 2, the demographic transition and the historical shift.
So how exactly does a society travel from a sky-high fertility rate of 6.5 all the way down to a shrinking 0.78? Well, it happens through the demographic transition. It's this historical journey that every industrialized society has gone through. You move from pre-industrial survival, where birth and death rates are both super high, to a post-industrial reality where both just plummet. And in the middle of that journey, a massive, explosive population boom.
Let's break this down. We've basically all moved past stage 1, where famine and disease kept human numbers really small. But in stage 2, things get super interesting. Better sanitation, vaccines, death rates absolutely plummet, but birth rates stay high. That's your explosive growth, like we just talked about in Niger. Then in stage 3, births finally start to drop off. Think places like India or Brazil. By stage 4, like Western Europe, everything stabilizes. But now we're seeing this emerging stage 5. This is completely uncharted territory, places like Japan or South Korea, where deaths actually outpace births and populations are actively shrinking.
Which brings us to the climax of our explainer in Section 3. What actually drives fertility down?
If you were guessing that it's raw wealth, GDP, or shiny new technology that forces birth rates down, well, actually scratch that, you'd be looking in the wrong place entirely. The single most consistent predictor of smaller family sizes across literally every region and culture ever studied is the educational attainment of women and girls. It is a real game changer.
Check this out. A girl who completes secondary school in a low-income country will, on average, bear 2 to 3 fewer children over her lifetime than a girl who doesn't. Why? Because education inherently delays marriage and the age of that first birth. It gives women economic power and options outside the home, giving her the leverage to negotiate family size. It just fundamentally shifts the entire cultural perception of what a large family means.
Of course, education doesn't operate in a total vacuum. It gets powerfully reinforced by things like rapid urbanization. Think about it. On a rural farm, a kid is an economic asset, right? They can work the fields. But in a modern city apartment, a child is an economic cost. They need schooling, they need food, and they aren't bringing in income.
Combine that urban shift with plunging infant mortality, so parents don't feel the need to have 6 kids just to make sure 3 survive, plus widespread access to contraception, and the whole economic reality of raising kids transforms overnight.
All right, let's tie this all together in Section 4, the environmental equation.
When we talk about environmental impact, it really just comes down to simple math. Population size multiplied by per capita consumption. And demographically, we've got an extreme mismatch here. Early transition stage 2 countries have exploding populations, but they consume very little per person. They aren't the ones driving massive resource extraction yet. On the other hand, post-industrial stage 4 countries have near zero population growth, but their individual per capita resource consumption is completely off the charts.
And this creates what demographers call the Stage 3 environmental pressure point. Right now, the absolute greatest strain on our planet comes from nations sitting smack in the middle of their transition. Places like India, Nigeria, and Indonesia. They're facing this geographic double whammy of massive, still growing populations that are simultaneously and rapidly scaling up their wealth and resource use. It is a massive multiplier effect in full swing.
So what does this all mean for us? It leaves us with a pretty profound realization. If managing global population naturally reduces long-term environmental pressure, then our social investments, specifically things like girls' education and basic healthcare, actually are our most powerful climate policies? It turns out, investing in human empowerment isn't just a nice humanitarian strategy. It might literally be the single most effective way to secure the resource future of our entire planet. Definitely something to chew on the next time you hear a debate on global climate policy.